These are the top 10 tight ends in the 2024 NFL Draft. What is going on is Alex came back at you with another video. So if you are new, feel free to join the community, like, comment, subscribe. You guys know how to use YouTube. Let's get right into this. Let's have fun, because at the end, not only am I breaking down all 10 of these tight ends, but I also graded them as receivers. So you guys get to check out a whole entire new ranking right after these. So let's jump right in. The number one tight end, of course, is Brock Bowers. If you guys are new to the series, this is the layout now. So I'm going to break this down. You guys get to see what their name is, what their height and weight is, and then where I think they'll go, what my exact grade is based on my grading scale, and then if I have a comp for them. And this time, I'm not really very confident about many of these comparisons, so I'm not going to give you guys a BS comparison. We'll probably be able to slide some of them in the longer that we wait, so bear with me on that front. On the bottom, dream fits. Those are honestly a couple of the realistic ones and maybe one out of the blue that I think would be a really cool spot for them to go. So don't take it too seriously. It's all for fun, but this is my exact grading scale. It actually goes weighted from most important on the top left all the way to least important on the right per the point value. So you will see certain players actually score pretty well in a lot of categories, but not in the ones that matter most to me. So let's get right into this. Looking at Brock Bowers, he is a super freak. I love him. He's a super weapon. I'm going to say he is definitely not on... He's part of the Mount Rushmore of tight ends I've studied, but he is not the creme de la creme. I think that still goes through Kyle Pitts. But just as an overall prospect, I fell in love with Brock Bowers, not because of who he was as a pure receiver, but you guys can see it. Who he is as a blocker. You know, he was, I think, in the 230 range last year, and he was blocking as well as Darnell Washington, and that was awesome to me. As somebody who really appreciates blocking, you know, that's a kind of a nuance of the game that's kind of been lost with a lot of tight ends recently, and Brock has shown that he has been able to do it better than any other tight end that I've officially graded. So good for him. He's honestly spectacular on that front. He's still excellent. You see a B, you're like, oh my God, like you are so harsh. No, I'm a pain in the ass grader. I'm like one of those professors that you don't want during college, to where like you're thanking the Lord for a B. B is very good. Very good. You don't get A pluses. A pluses are creme de la creme. So the fact that Brock Bowers has an insane contested catch ratio or rate, and then he has unbelievable blocking, that is top tier of all tight ends I've studied. So again, this is a composite compared to all tight ends. A C is average. So B is pretty damn good. Like a B plus is really damn good, and the A's are god tier. So just keep that in mind. So yeah, again, he's extremely talented. I think he gets off the line a little bit slower than I'd want him to. That's probably my one issue with Brock is, you know, he builds up speed very well. But if I need to throw the ball within 3 seconds, I don't know if he's going to get as much separation as I think he can get. And does that mean he won't continue to improve his get off the line? Absolutely not. This guy was showing during COVID, he was sending videos to Kirby Smart of him working out in Palo Alto. Like, this guy has unbelievable work ethic, unbelievable drive. So I have nothing against this man whatsoever. I think he's going to get this solved and do whatever the hell he wants. He's an excellent player. As a receiver alone, you will see he graded out very similarly. So great for him. He's honestly one of those guys that should definitely be coveted above almost every other player in the class. I don't know if the NFL values tight end as much as they should. I don't know if they should value Brock as a tight end or just a receiving threat, but I do think he could end up being in that Kelsey tier. Maybe not the best of all time, but I believe in the right situation, he could end up finding that right role. And again, extremely smart player as well. He finds the soft spots, so you know, that's a really coveted trait nowadays in the NFL, because now it's more up to the tight end to decide where he wants to break a route, and having that intuition about where to stop and be open for your QB, it's a big plus. So I love Brock Bowers for that reason, but you know, the Rams, they need everything, so I'm not going to include them anymore on this list, but they need help. Washington's always been kind of a tight end away from having an elite offense, and then the Buccaneers. Again, you know, Cade Otton, as much as I would love for them not to go after Brock Bowers, since, you know, I have Cade Otton in a dynasty league, I still think it's a major area of improvement for them. So next we got Jaheim Bell out of now Florida State. Jaheim is pretty damn awesome. I like Jaheim. He's just kind of that weird, super flexible guy when it comes to positions. He'll be even taking reps at running back. I think he had over 230 yards, like 237 on the ground. And he's that H-back type, that Chig Okonkwo type. If I had to put a comparison there, it would probably be Chig. Like, very athletic, very versatile. He's honestly pretty damn good when it comes to the contested catch. I've seen him do some pretty crazy shit, so great on him for that. Because Spencer Rattler, even though his drop rate is pretty low, Jaheim, there was a massive uptick in the past year, so I had to knock him for that. Even though Spencer Rattler did not necessarily put the ball in the best situations, I'm still going to call it as I see it. And there were times where I didn't see him have as assertive of hands as I was hoping for, and seeing that uptick, I have to call it out as it is. He is sub 240. That's going to drop that frame size, but as an athlete, he is very, very good. Is he going to run in the 4.3s? I don't believe so. I think maybe he'll be in the high 4.5s, and that is perfectly fine. He's pretty damn fluid as an athlete. I don't think he's got the nuance down of being a route runner because he's been put in so many situations, but given the fact that he's been able to have success as pretty much just a running back and a glorified streak and drag guy, he's doing a pretty damn good job. Not a liability as a blocker either, but I wouldn't want him to be a full-time fullback, and I don't think anybody really would argue with that. But as you guys can tell, you can see the drop-off between Brock Bowers and my number 2 tight end here in Jaheim Bell. It's an 82 to 70.75. So for quick maths, that's, I believe, 11.25 difference. That's a significant, that's a massive, that's a double tier drop. Not saying that Jaheim is bad by any stretch of the imagination. My grading scale is a pain in the ass, but it is showing how much better Brock is than the rest. So, dream fits, I mean, you look at the Bengals, they could probably be any of these teams on here. They're just a squad that for some reason doesn't value the tight end position as much as they should. Dolphins, I would love to see Jaheim in a system where, Mike McDaniel can get him on the move and just see what the hell happens. And the Ravens, they always know how to use. I think he could be a use check type role there for them. Even though he's not the best at blocking, just being able to be a very versatile threat there as the fullback or as an H-back. It's just one of those weird spots where I know the Ravens would use him properly. It's not a realistic spot, but it's just still a fun one to ponder. Next, we got JaTavion Sanders, most people's tight end too. Not a very big difference between him and Jaheim Bell. Not nearly the difference between Brock Bowers and Jaheim. But he's just super balanced overall. He's a very solid athlete. I don't really feel like he gets off the line that fast. Do have an issue with that. But there's really nothing he does poorly. Route running, I was a little bit let down. He doesn't get the separation that I'm looking for when it comes to how he ran those routes. His hands, he had a couple weird drops here and there, but he's overall fairly consistent. If you see it in the B's range, they're probably sub 7% drop rate, which is adequate to say the least. But good in terms of his contested catch. He's just above the 240 frame. So you'll see the difference between a C plus and a B minus is going to be whether they breach that 240 mark. And so we're not seeing these monster tight ends. Like last year we had the 270, 265. We had a big run of huge tight ends. This year, not so much. It's going to be much more of the slimmer tight ends. And that's unfortunately a pretty big theme down the list. But JaTavion Sanders, still a very dynamic athlete, someone who I have a lot of respect for. I was a little bit underwhelmed when it came to the actual nuances of route running. But, still a very quality player. I think he's a very good tight end 2 with tight end 1 upside in the NFL. But, that's something you can take in the second round. And it's probably a spot where he will end up going. Could end up being a late first, but I think some teams are just going to see that big of a drop off and they're going to be like, it kind of reminds us of what we should be looking for in tight ends. But a team like the Jets, they got Zach Kuntz in there, who's going to be hopefully a future star for them, but they could always use some extra depth. Washington, already mentioned them, but also the Texans. You could keep JaTavion down in the south of Texas there by transferring him from Austin to Houston, and you could end up having a really good receiving threat there for CJ Stroud for the future. we'll definitely check that out. And I think they'll also have an earlier second round pick. So it is a very feasible range for top 40 for the Texans to be within striking distance. Next is Brevin Spann Ford, finally breaking the 240-pound frame limit, apart from JaTavion by 3 pounds. 270-pounder. One of the better route runners in this class. It was very surprising. I saw a double move from Brevin, and it was like, whoa. It was crazy. So, big fan of Brevin Spann Ford on that front. Randomly, a really crap blocker. I don't get that. So, he's pretty much Darnell Washington, but you swap the blocking with the route running. Think of it that way. That's why I couldn't comp him to Darnell, because Darnell is like a tackle, essentially. Brevin is extremely raw as a blocker. And I don't really want to take a 270-pound man who can't block and put him as a pure tight end. But at the same time, if you know how to develop tight end blocking, this is a great guy. I honestly should have put the Eagles on here as a dream fit. You know, you have Albert Okwuegbunam there as a backup, but I think that Brevin Spann Ford would be an even better one. So keep that in the back of your mind, because, you know, if you have Stoutland say, hey, I'm going to work with you on your blocking, then you could have something here for sure. But randomly, his contested catch is not very good. Of course, we saw that Tanner Morgan was not necessarily putting him in the best situations. And it's unfortunate because Tanner Morgan 2 years ago, was actually performing extremely well. So it's surprising to see him drop off that much. But excellent frame there, 6'7", 270. He's extremely athletic too. Another one of those guys that just does not get off the line that fast, but he picks up speed. Picks up speed very well. So good for him. Doesn't break very many tackles, but does like to lower the shoulder as he should. But yeah, the missed tackle force numbers are just not there. But the route running and speed for that size is ridiculous. I'd love to see Kellen Moore get his hands on him. You know, Robert Tonyan, I believe, is there only for a year for Chicago. So, you know, having him as a backup and keeping him there up in the north. And then, you know, Patriots being able to actually get a tight end that could potentially develop as a blocker would be pretty intriguing. Next, you got Brant Cutie. Now we're swapping all the way back to the other side of the extreme in the sub 230 range. He is essentially a glorified big-ass slot receiver, but, you know, he's super twitchy overall, like really good athlete as he needs to be at that size. Surprisingly better blocker than, you know, the guy who I just mentioned who's 270. That's a big plus, but, you know, this guy's going to be known to get open. He's a good route runner. He can, you know, just change. He can flip his hips well. He's going to get open. He was a Dalton Kincaid before Dalton Kincaid. Now, Kincaid was a much larger tight end, but I'm talking about the usage in the Utah offense. This guy, even with Kincaid on the field, was the trusted option of Cam Rising. So that says a lot when a first-round potential, a future top 5 tight end in the NFL is placed behind Cutie. It shows that this guy is a very reliable target, even though randomly his contested catch is crap. He has a bunch of drops. Like, this guy is the one who's able to get open reliably, and that's very coveted in the NFL. Get him on a jugs machine, he'll be perfectly fine. But again, looking for a team that might want a potential big slot. I know the Panthers, for example, could definitely be looking for somebody, since, you know, DJ Chark's on a 1-year deal. You could want to have, you know, potentially even leaving him on the outside. There's just many options that you can have for Brant Cutie, and, you know, just be able to give your quarterback an option that can get open and actually does have some good size to him, just not as an inline tight end, even though he was used sometimes as an inline tight end. That's why I included him here. Speaking of a guy who was not used really ever as an inline tight end, he was primarily the slot, is Oronde Gadsden. It's Gadsden, but that's a pain in the ass. It's a tongue twister. But Oronde, he was extremely fluid as a route runner. The problem is this guy is so damn slow. Like, I'll see him just run super smooth routes, and I'm like, damn, this guy can totally get open if he could just put the pedal to the metal. I don't know why, because you see that image of him. He is not some overweight or just super scrawny guy. He has a good physique, and he doesn't have much fat on him. I'm just very surprised that he's not able to build up speed. He's even lighter at 223 pounds than Brant Cutie, who we just mentioned. So Weird, but he has really good hands. I trust him. And his quarterback threw YOLO balls only to Gadsden. And when you got to see other receivers open, he was still the target for their quarterback there. So he's obviously not going to be a good blocker. Otherwise, they would have put him probably more as an inline at 223. Don't want him going up against 270-pound edge rushers. Surprisingly, not many force missed tackles, but again, the route running was certainly there, especially on those 45-degree cuts like slants, post, corners. He could flip his hips very well. And even on those 90-degree cut routes, I think they did perfectly fine. When it came to curls, like the 180-degree turns, didn't do nearly as well as I would hope, but still really good player. I think a team like the Steelers, who could be, well, we'll probably not have Allen Robinson on the team in a year or two, so could be a role to have him fit there as a big slot. Or you could have, I always talk about the Ravens getting bigger targets for Lamar is always a good idea. And then, people are talking about Emeka Egbuka being a good option there for the Titans. If you want a really cheap version in the 4th or 5th round, this guy could be a slower, more cheap version to add to your tight end rotation. So going next, we have Jalen Conyers here. So he's going to be more that super big threat. There's not a lot of tape I've honestly been able to see on him. There's not all 22 out on him, and it's a pain in the ass to find good tape on him. I'm just going to be honest. It's not easy. So take it with a grain of salt. You'll see that the next couple tight ends are all within that 64.5 grade. So you can rearrange them. And they're all different reasons. So Conyers, he has a ton of force missed tackles, but he's slow. He's just a big hunking dude. And he looks like it too. He's a big dude. I'm surprised he's 265. He looks like he's 285. Does not look like a very solid route runner. Most of his routes were pretty nuanced as, like curled outs that were just like 3 yards. And I just didn't like it. Didn't really see much as a blocker, but again, super limited tape. That's something that needs a lot more tape in order to be finalized. He could end up being my tight end 5 when all is said and done. It's not that hard to get a quick boost in blocking, and then boom, you're instantly there. But as of now, drops, a little bit of a concern. But this guy is a contested catch freak, so I believe he is above that 65% contested catch rate, which is very solid, especially since Emory Jones is not necessarily the most trustworthy guy. But it's just on super small sample size. I think it was something like 29 receptions last year. He had like 23 forced missed tackles. Ridiculous on that, but he's a battering ram. I don't really know if I trust that as a translatable trait to the NFL. This is a huge question mark as to whether he'll go way up or way down, but time will tell. Next, we got Benjamin Yurasic out of Stanford. So pretty much, having Elijah Higgins as the tight end that he should have been rather than the tight end that he has now become. But Yurasic, a very good athlete. When it comes to doing those 180-degree turns and, the 90-degree cuts, slows down too much. Too many indicators. So he's not going to get any form of separation to the NFL doing high-level route running. But when it comes to those 45 cuts like the post, he definitely can get open. That was one of my favorite things about him. He was actually the reason I ended up adding a 45-degree cut versus a 90-degree/180. So a hard cut versus a slanted cut route running for my grading scale for wide receivers. He's the main reason because I realized there's such a big difference between 45-degree cuts and then 90s/180s. It's just different mechanics completely. So, just not being able to run more than essentially one route or two routes, not great. But he was surprisingly a really good blocker, and I was seeing him go up against guys like in Washington. So we were looking at some very, very talented edge rushers there, and he was holding his own, to say the least. Good job for him. A lot of respect. This guy is super reliable. You throw him the ball, he's going to catch it. He's going to catch it in traffic as well. Just overall a very good player, but the two top categories, which is he's not going to break any tackles and he's going to not get any separation except for on maybe one or two routes. That's the big issue. So again, the Bengals are going to be a consistent team that I'll probably put in here. But the Seahawks, just because they like Stanford tight ends. And then, again, we got another team that could definitely use some extra tight end help there in the Texans. Next, we got Luke Lackey, who is a Broshmo favorite, but I don't like him remotely. Now, let's not bag on the guy. He has very consistent hands. When it comes to the contested catch, I might not blame him because his quarterback, Petrus, was complete butt cheeks. But this guy sucks as a blocker. And that's the biggest crime that I've ever seen for an Iowa tight end, that you cannot block. Really surprising to me. Also, another thing about Lackey, he runs routes very well, but never gets any separation. And the reason why is because he makes no form of effort to actually show the defender either that he's continuing forward, so they need to watch out, they need to essentially back up rather than stick to his hip the whole time. And he doesn't try to, in any way, shape, or form, fake out the defender. So he never generates separation. It's quite unfortunate. But I remember seeing there was a rep where I was like, damn, Sam Laporta, he's not doing well this play. And I realized it was just Luke Lackey. So that was quite depressing. Obviously, Luke weighs 10 pounds more than Sam Laporta does, but it's still should not be that big of a difference. And it is. It really was a huge difference. So Lackey, certainly lacking in a lot of categories, but reliable hands, good frame. That's probably the best I could say about him. And then ending off the list, we got Ben Sinnott here, Kansas State. So Cade Warner, which is actually Kurt Warner's son, is significantly better. Granted, Cade was a wide receiver, also now cut. He just got waived by the Buccaneers. Didn't even realize he went to the NFL. I loved him. I love Cade. I love Cade Warner a lot. So that was my direct comparison the whole time for Sinnott. Sinnott, there was just a lot that was not super NFL quality in my eyes. I just didn't totally see it. So take that as you will. But, I didn't like his blocking. He was a liability, and that's not good. I don't like when a tight end's a liability in the run game. I didn't think he was spectacular at running routes. He didn't break tackles to a huge degree. He had moments, and that's the thing. This guy's a highlight reel machine, but he's not a down-to-down basis type of guy you want. He is going to have a good contested catch rate, over 60%, and that's great. He's not an awful athlete, but he's nothing spectacular. That's really the best thing I could say about him is that he puts up some big plays, and that's because he's a contested catch machine. So good for him. But, I could see him totally being a fullback role as he continues developing better blocking skills, and then just being that guy who slips out, and then you just kind of lob it up to and say YOLO. That's pretty much all he can do. But maybe teams that look for a backup tight end, the Chiefs, for example, the Raiders can always use it over Austin Hooper, and then the Jaguars just because Doug Peterson. It's good spots for him. But what I promised you guys, the receiver rankings. So yes, you guys, if you want to scroll back and look at all of the individual grades, this is the grade if they were just a wide receiver. This goes through the same grading scale. So you got Brock Bowers there, who is still a blue chip player at 80.25. Jaheim Bell and Brant Cutie are right in there. The route runners will usually be able to get that. JaTavion Sanders, I started grading all the tight ends as wide receivers after watching him. So it was first Bryson Nesbitt, who I watched, who just missed the list. And then it was JaTavion Sanders. Those were my first two tight ends. So I ended up grading them as wide receivers after that. But JaTavion, it's pretty obvious. You translate the ability from tight end in terms of route running, catching, yada, yada. And you break it down a little bit more for wide receivers. He's going to be right up there with Brant Cutie for sure. But you got Oronde Gadsden, who's a slot wide receiver, essentially. Makes sense. What you're seeing here is a much lower weight on the blocking. Those who can block don't get crutched up as much. So you're seeing Benjamin Yurasic, who had a good blocking grade, end up dropping quite a bit. But Brevin Spann, who ran really good routes, but necessarily didn't have the acceleration that might have pushed him over Oronde Gadsden. Then you got Jalen Conyers in there, who, again, he just is slow, doesn't run routes well. Sinnott, same thing. So I just wanted to toss this in there as kind of like a fun aspect, but because a lot of times tight ends could end up just being focused on as, can you run after the catch and truck a dude over? Can you block? And it's not just that. A lot of tight ends are used as just pure receiving threats. So for teams, maybe like the Chiefs that are looking for a tight end, this maybe will be their board. Maybe they'll be like, damn, I kind of want Jaheim Bell over JaTavion Sanders. Let's trade back and get an extra third-round pick, and then we'll get a guy who fits us better. So think about that as you will. Thank you so much for watching. See you on the far side. Peace.